I got top 32 in the Vancouver regionals with a Dondozo Glimmora team, but I didn't start with this team. In fact, it took quite a while to get to it, and it's not even completely my team. Here's the Vancouver team report of the team I reached day 2 with. After I lost in Orlando, I knew I had to fix some of my team's weaknesses. I had to make a decision about what I wanted to do going forward. Is Dozo something that can be iterated on, or should I scrap it for something completely different? It's always good to be open-minded. I love Dondozo, but that doesn't mean there couldn't be something better. However, I was always leaning Dondozo for a few reasons. One is that straight up, it's a good Pokemon. Dondozo Tatsugiri is one of the best cores in the format, period. It's good at high level play, but it's also good at farming weaker teams too. Every team needs to have something for Dondozo, and it's difficult to beat it purely through outplaying with strong attackers. But also, Dondozo fit my skill set. I back myself to understand long-term plans and ideas better than anyone, and it's something I can be elite at starting from day 1. But one thing I'm still getting used to is the raw decision making per turn. Playing a standard 2-on-2 has a lot of possibilities and decisions to make, and that's where I can make mistakes. I've practiced enough that I think I'm good at making decisions in traditional doubles, but if I want to win events, simply being good isn't enough. I have to be perfect. From a general design principle, you want to put yourself in situations that you want to be in, and I believe that I had an advantage in Dondozo 1v2 battles. I would have the experience edge, and I would know what long-term goals I would want to achieve from Dondozo without having to worry about complications every turn. My call was that Dondozo is an elite Pokemon, and it fits my skill set, so it's a no-brainer to keep using it. It's something that I can win consistently. However, going into Vancouver, the metagame has also changed a lot. Namely, Palafin started becoming a lot more popular, specifically Haze Palafin. The most common archetype was a Moongus Arcanine Iron Hands Palafin. Honestly, it's almost a perfect team. Good type synergy, fake out, redirection, intimidate, spore, offense, and defense, the core had it all. That's something I definitely had to worry about. Overall, there were 3 main weaknesses I wanted to tackle. Number 1 was fast-paced offense like I lost to Emilio Forbes in Orlando. In particular, Booster Energy Iron Bundle was a nightmare for my team. If it could knock out Dondozo, then my Tatsugiri is a sitting duck and would die to Freeze Dry next turn. Something like Iron Bundle and Great Tusk would run over my team with Icy Wind plus Earthquake. My own form of speed control, Volcarona, wasn't fast enough and I was susceptible to getting run over. Basically, faster offense beats fast offense. Number 2 was other Dondozo team. My team, simply put, was not equipped to beat other Dondozo. I had no plan besides timer stall. I wanted to have a concrete way to fix that because Dondozo is a good strategy and it's not something I should hide from. Finally, number 3 was the Palafin balance I mentioned earlier. I didn't have a good matchup versus that. Also, as a side note, Trick Room Psychic Spam was metagame trending. In DD Armarouge, Torkoal can destroy a lot of teams. Even though I'm not overtly weak to it, it was something I had to keep an eye on because it would be common. I wanted to have solid lines into Trick Room. My initial thought was to keep Mouse Hold Annihilate for the Palafin matchup. Dondozo is scary, and in Palafin matchups, my opponent basically has to lead Palafin so that it can immediately switch out so it can be back later. Palafin's a great Pokemon, but that one turn at the beginning is a flaw. Mouse Ape could let me attack that flaw. Palafin would clog up the lane, and I could use that one turn as a setup opportunity for the beat up Annihilate strategy. Attacking is the best form of defense, and I could solve Dondozo's inherent Palafin weakness by putting the pressure on Palafin itself. It's not perfect, but it is one angle to take. I still had other issues though. That's when I started talking to my friend Jesse, who also liked the Mouse Hold Annihilate idea. He had a pretty interesting perspective and recommended Lycanroc Tyranitar in the final 2 slots. Lycanroc is not very common. It's probably a C or B tier threat if we're being honest. But the best way to beat faster offense is with the fastest offense. Sandrush Lycanroc would do great versus fast Tailwind teams and Booster Energy Iron Bundle stuff. It doesn't have the power to break slower balanced teams, but that's what Mouse Hold Annihilate is for. You would go Mouse Hold Annihilate versus slow teams, and Lycanroc T-Tar versus fast teams. Also, Tyranitar had a pretty good matchup versus Psychic Spam, which was something to keep an eye on. Finally, to patch up the Dondozo weakness, he went with Terra Grass Dondozo to Terra Blast opposing Dondozo. With Focus Sash Endeavor Lycanroc, the Dozo matchup was playable. It ticked all the boxes for what I wanted. Jesse would end up using this iteration of the team to go 7-2 himself, so it definitely worked. But I didn't like the feel of it. I felt like Maushold just gets stat checked too hard by some of the Paradox Pokemon. Powerful Pokemon could just double target it on turn 1 and smash it before it could beat up. Maushold Annihilate is great at escaping bad matchups because of all the possible decisions like Protect and Bulk Up and Follow Me and Terrestrialization, etc. But just from a reliability point of view, I didn't think it was consistent enough for me to be comfortable with it. Also, Lycanroc at the end of the day is still not a highly regarded strategy. On paper it filled the holes, but I was worried that in practice it just might be a little too weak. Also, the team didn't have a lot of flexibility. You essentially had 3 distinct pairs of Pokemon. One of the most underrated parts of Dozo is having Pokemon that are good alongside either Dondozo or Tatsugiri. The number one type of Pokemon to fit that thing is having a strong independent attacker. For example, in the early game you could have the option of leading Dondozo with a powerful Pokemon and your opponent's already in a nasty bind. If they try to attack the strong Pokemon, they risk me switching into Tatsugiri and smashing something with Dondozo. The opposite is true too. If I protect with Dondozo and they attack into it, my other Pokemon can smash something too. Beyond that, a strong Pokemon pairs well with Icy Wind Tatsugiri dropping speed. The Lycanroc adaptation of the team didn't have the strong independence that I wanted, so I wanted to look at other ideas. However, his Terra Blast Grass idea was definitely worth keeping. I was still skeptical of dropping Terra Steel, which is overall a much better type, but Grass has its merits, including an immunity to Spore. Ordinarily, Amoonguss runs Clear Smog. That's why in Orlando I had Substitute and Terra Steel to maneuver past Spore and Clear Smog both. But with all the Palafins running Haze, you didn't really need Clear Smog if you could Haze with Palafin. A lot of teams were actually dropping Clear Smog off their Amoonguss. That gave me a chance to run Terra Grass without Substitute. The other idea I was looking at was Poison. Toxic Spike's Iron Moth plus Dondozo reached top 4 in Bakum. Toxic was interesting to me because it had a very tangible benefit. It beats other Dondozo. It also formed a great core with Fluttermane, a Pokemon I liked from Orlando. Iron Moth with Booster Energy can use Acid Spray to outspeed and weaken a Pokemon. Then Fluttermane can destroy it with a move like Dazzling Gleam. Toxic Spike's Iron Moth formed natural synergy with what I wanted to do while also beating opposing Dondozo. However, it didn't solve my other issues like Palafin or fast offense. I was planning on dropping Maushold Annihilate anyway, so it wouldn't have been too radical of a change. I could keep Dozogiri, add Fluttermoth, and then find 2 other Pokemon. Honestly, I could literally just steal the team and make my own EV spreads. But through my testing, I didn't find a way to make it work in a way I felt comfortable. I needed to find a Palafin beater and a fast offense beater in 2 slots. I would additionally need to beat Psychic Spam Trick Room. Also, Iron Moth gets pressured because of time. Flutter and Iron Moth can get pressured by strong physical attackers, and oftentimes I have to make a decision. Do I go for Acid Spray strategies or Toxic Spike strategies? Very rarely could I do both, at least in my experience. What if I could get the Toxic Spikes but with more time on my hands? That's where I looked at Glimmora. Glimmora has the ability Toxic Debris, so it doesn't have to waste a turn to get it up. In exchange, however, you would have to attack yourself in order to guarantee trigger it. At this point, Glimmora was an underrated Pokemon. Rock Poison is pretty whatever, and its moves aren't very strong either. In Orlando, I lost to Emilio Forbes, and he was one of the few people using Glimmora, and the pressure it exerted was tremendous. Besides the whole poison idea, Glimmora is deceptively strong because it punishes defensive terrestrialization. Rock and Poison aren't strong specially attacking types, but they attack all the right things. Grass and Fire are the most common terrestrialization types because of their immunity to Spore and Rage Powder, and immunity to Will-O-Wisp and resistance to Moonblast respectively. Glimmora beats all of that. Flying is pretty common too, and so is Steel, and Power Gem and Earth Power hit those too. Glimmora felt extremely underrated, and Glimdozo felt like a natural partnership. And there was something very interesting. Glimdozo had been done before. Strider VGC, who I met at Orlando, actually ran Glimmora Dondozo in Knoxville where he finished top 32. I actually didn't know that Mortal Spin affected both Pokemon on the field before I saw his team. In singles, Mortal Spin is mainly used for hazard removal. I liked his team a lot, and in particular I liked his Assault Vest Glimmora. It's perfect. Assault Vest protects you from special attackers, and if your opponent dares hit you with a physical attack, you get Toxic Spikes up. Mortal Spin provides immediate poison pressure, and Glimmora is strong enough to be threatening on its own. With Terra Grass as an option to change its typing, it's the perfect Pokemon with offense and defense. The biggest thing over Iron Moth is that it buys time. Glimmora is tanky enough that I can tank a couple hits, which lets me get more poison control. The more I thought about it, the more I liked Glimmora Dondozo, and the more I couldn't really think of a way to improve on his version of the team. At this point, we were both mutuals, and we talked and we both realized we think Glimmora Dondozo is the play for Vancouver. Also, Neil VGC agreed too. The person who got top 4 in Bakum with T-Spike's Iron Moth was actually his student, so Neil understood how good T-Spike's Dozo could be. We all eventually reached the same conclusion of bringing Assault Vest Glimmora with Dondozo. We were going to be the 3 Musketeers of Glimmora at Vancouver. Strider would end up using the same 6 Pokemon as his Knoxville team, and Neil VGC would make some drastic changes and added Pokemon like Dragonite and Iron Bundle. Neither approach was really wrong. Strider finished top 16 and Neil finished top 8. That's honestly a really good conversion rate. 3 for 3 in making day 2, and if you counted, Jesse with his Dondozo Lycanroc makes it 4 for 4. Incidentally, another player, Techno Z, who I don't know, also made top 8 with his own Glimmora Dondozo team. He had a different idea though and used it with Pasho Berry. I took a middle of the road approach between Strider and Neil. I liked a lot of the idea, but I didn't feel like it needed a complete revamp. However, I was still scared of Palafin. I was also worried about potentially the lack of offense. Like I mentioned earlier, an often overlooked aspect of Dondozo is life after Dondozo. When Dondozo faints, you're left with a Choice Scarf Tatsugiri who can either drop a Draco or use a support move like Icy Wind. Tatsugiri pairs well with powerful attackers because of the Icy Wind support it can provide. Tatsugiri next to a support Pokemon is suboptimal, but next to a strong Pokemon it's really good. Fluttermane was a strong attacker of choice during Orlando and I loved it. I eventually decided to replace Strider's Talonflame with a Terra Water Fluttermane. It was definitely a trade-off. Losing Tailwind is huge, but in exchange I gain a fast attacker and a slightly better way to beat Palafin. And that's how I reached the 6 Pokemon on my team. Dondozo is the star of the show and I went with Earthquake, Order Up, and Terra Blast. Spread damage, protect stall, and spread damage some more. Not too complicated. A notable change from Orlando is that I added a lot more special defense EVs to take on Fluttermane and Iron Bundle, who try to target Dozo's low special defense. Strider and Neil both had Wave Crash instead of Order Up, and either move is fine, I just wanted better protection versus Intimidate spam. Tatsugiri is pretty standard and the 4th move is variable. I've seen Dragon Pulse or Chilling Water, but I prefer Sleep Talk to give me insurance versus Amoonguss. I've experimented with a lot of different types, and Tatsugiri doesn't Terra often, but when it does, Water is the best. A strong spread move is huge, and Water is a respectable offensive type. 20 EVs in special defense make sure you always live Iron Bundle's Freeze Dry after a Terrestrialization. It's good in a pinch and only costs a little special attack. Tatsugiri is a support Pokemon, but annoying enough offensively that your opponent has to respect it, and that can open up a lot of holes as long as you take care of Booster Energy Bundle. The Glimmora is built for offense and defense, tanking hits and spreading damage. Raw power is not as much of a priority here, so the EVs are better off in defense and special defense. This is Strider's EV spread and is meant to take on powerful common Pokemon like Iron Bundle, Great Tusk after Terra, and Fluttermane. Other move options are cool too, like Energy Ball or Dazzling Gleam, but it's hard to figure out what you drop to accommodate it. Similar to Dondozo, Glimmora has a lot of moves it wants to run but only 4 move slots to use. Pawmot is an interesting pick and it's not that common. However, with Dondozo the synergies are very clear. The only thing better than 1 Dondozo is 2 Dondozo. Terra Electric Double Shock is a nuke, and Fake Out is a nice priority move to have. There's nothing too revolutionary here. It's a generic attacking Pokemon that has synergies with Dondozo. Something interesting to note is that a lot of Specs Fluttermane are opting to go bulky instead of fast. The idea is that if you can live an attack, you get to throw off 2 Specs attacks instead of just 1. The most common benchmark I've seen is EVing enough defense to live Arcanine's Flare Blitz. Pawmot isn't a relevant speed benchmark, so a lot of Fluttermane actually get outspeed by Pawmot. It's a risk to bank on it happening, but in a best of 3 context, it's something to keep an eye out for. Arcanine is just a generic good Pokemon. Intimidate, those stats, and that move pool is amazing. Arcanine is either an A rank or S rank Pokemon depending on how you look at it. For this team, Arcanine fits as a one-hit KO threat on Amoonguss. This is valuable because Arcanine turns Amoonguss into a liability, but the opponent wants to use Amoonguss to absorb Toxic Spikes. You can exert a lot of pressure with the Glimmora Arcanine combination. Snarl with Terra Dark is meant for the Psychic Spam matchup. Trick Room sometimes likes to use King Gambit, so you do have to be careful with Intimidate Arcanine and Snarl, but it's overall a decent way to beat Psychic Trick Room. Finally, we have the most exotic Pokemon with special attacking boosting Fluttermane. I wanted Fluttermane because it's one of the best Pokemon in the format and works well adjacent Tatsugiri. I went with Terra Water Thunderbolt to resist Palafin and throw off a super effective attack. Terra Water has the additional benefit of taking on Arcanine and Goldango too. The bulk is mainly for Arcanine and Palafin stuff, and the speed benchmark is to outspeed Pawmot. I lose to fast Fluttermane, but ideally I should be outspeeding all other bulky Fluttermane. Everything else is in special attack. And that's the team. Most of it was adapted from Strider, but I did create the Fluttermane idea. If you want to use a team yourself, it's in the description, and check out Strider and Neil on YouTube too.